one of the many principals involved in this that the director of athletics, Mark Harlan, gave some credit to yesterday on social media. He's the chief operating officer and deputy director of athletics and chief schedule maker, apparently. Kyle Brennan joining us here on the Bill Riley Show. How are you?
Hey, good, Bill. How are you?
Doing great. So you got one of those off your plate. We're still waiting on that other announcement, but walk us through the LSU thing, because I'm always curious, Kyle, how these things come about and how you put these together. And, you know, football games seem to be even more difficult to schedule than basketball games. So kind of walk us back in time and how this thing came around.
Yeah. Well, I like chief scheduler. That's a new one I'll put on my resume. I like that.
It sounds good.
Yeah, it's great. So really it's a lot like horse trading. You've got a lot of calls back and forth, and it gets really interesting where you're trying to make a deal or you're not trying to make a deal, and who can you play, who can you not. And so really this one came about through Gavin Goff on our staff, who worked really hard just putting together a lot of phone calls and talking people into this idea because, believe it or not, it's hard for us to get great opponents to come to Salt Lake City because we're a tough opponent ourselves. And so some of these schools will look at us and they don't want to take the risk. But LSU, a great opponent, and they were willing to come out to Salt Lake City because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those opportunities that are not just great for our recruits to tell them they're playing in Louisiana, but for our fans, for that opportunity for them to see a great team like LSU come in is just something you can't turn down.
So you start the initial conversations, and however those go. You're having to find dates that are available too, not just for you, but match up for them as well. And you knew this probably wasn't going to be any time in the near future. 2031 and 2032 are ways away, but I guess that's where you are with things today with scheduling, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't think anyone wants to schedule that far out because you really don't know what you're getting that many years out. But at the same time, all the games are being taken up. So if you don't get on board, you're going to get left behind. So do we want to be scheduling 31 and 32? Not necessarily, but really you don't have much choice when all the games are being taken up. So, I was just talking to my son the other night. I think he'll be out of college by the time this is done, and he's in high school right now. So it's definitely a ways out. But I think it communicates the right message to our fans that we want to play top-notch opponents. We want to make sure that, the season ticket that they buy as often as we can, we're giving them that great opponent to come into Salt Lake City and for us to show on the national stage that we're competitive and we can win on that level. And so even if it's 10 years out, we're going to make that call.
Was there any hesitancy on LSU's? I can't figure there was on your part to go to Baton Rouge, but was there any hesitancy on LSU's part to come out this direction?
No, and that was one of the reasons that this was so attractive is I think LSU coming off a national championship feels like, they can take on anyone at this point. And so for us, that was a great opportunity to jump in because they're thinking, hey, we can go play Utah. They just won a national championship. So you have to find people at the right time. If a program's down and you call them and you want to schedule, even though it's 10 years out, they're a little more shaky on whether they're going to do that. So that's kind of how it works.
Talking to Kyle Brennan, Chief Operating Officer, Deputy Director of Athletics, Chief Scheduler as well for athletics and football with us here on the Bill Riley Show today. What kind of, when you, whether it's LSU, whether it's this school to be named, whether it's Wyoming, whatever it might be, Kyle, what are some of the usual questions you get from schools when you enter these kind of contracts and negotiations? Because I would guess, people that aren't west of the Rockies know the name Utah and know the program is good, but maybe they don't know a lot about coming out here or things like that. So what are a lot of the hesitancies or the questions you get about coming to play and doing a home and home?
Yeah, the hesitancies that we get and the questions that I get are ones that they'll never admit publicly, but most of the time there's a hesitancy to come out to Salt Lake City because they know it is a tough place to play. We got the Muss, we've got great student section, we've got great fans, and I think a lot of these opponents worry that they're going to come out here and it's going to be tougher than they bargained for. So a lot of coaches, I think, in the background tell their administrators that they don't want to come here. So that's a challenge that we face. I think some of the questions that we get are about tickets. Most places where they go, there's plenty of tickets for their fans, but here at Rice-Eccles Stadium, the great news for us is that we sell out. And so one of the big concerns they have is can they get enough tickets? And so we've had to actually negotiate that down with LSU from the ticket allotment they wanted to the ticket allotment that we gave them because of how we're always at capacity, which is a great thing.
I'm wondering, will the new addition make a, I don't know if that means anything, but renovations to a stadium, better locker rooms, better the better overall kind of game atmosphere? Does that help in scheduling, or maybe not so much?
Oh, absolutely. I think anytime you make your program better and put yourself on a national stage by doing something like an expansion to your stadium when most people are having trouble filling theirs, that it puts you in a position to be talked about and to be thought of at a high level. And so, I think all of that helps. And if they've ever been here and seen the locker room, they might not come out. So I think getting this new one will be helpful for those who've been here in the past. I think they'll be excited to come out and be in a new facility.
I know there's two because Mark's teased that a couple of times on the show. I'm not going to ask you who it is because I know you're not going to tell me in advance, but is there a timeline for that next announcement on a non-conference opponent?
No timeline. Like I told you, there's a lot of back and forth calls, and 1 minute you think you have a deal, and the next minute you don't. So we'll wait until it's actually done. But I can tell you it's a big opponent and someone that everyone would love to see.
On par with an LSU?
On par with an LSU.
Okay, fair enough. How often do you have I know you want to be cautious because you don't want to let news get out and then something happens because, again, no deal is done till the ink is dry on the piece of paper. But how often over your experience in doing this have you had deals fall through last second like that? Has that happened to you?
Oh, yeah, it happens all the time. And I think because everyone is juggling and they're not always honest about what they can and can't do or what they want to do and what they don't want to do. It's kind of like hide the ball. And so until it's signed, you don't have a deal. I've learned that much. So, we're not going to make an announcement on this other one until we have it done, but really optimistic right now.
Do you ever shoot for the moon? Maybe an LSU was a shoot for the moon, but, I mean, are there programs out there that you could pick up the phone and call, but there's no way they'll do a home-and-home with you? Or is that just, based on program to program, you give it a shot and see what happens?
Well, I think in the past there was a lot of opportunity for schools to turn us down when we were in the Mountain West. Playing Utah in the past meant you were going to come out and have a tough game, and you're going to lose to a non-Power 5 school back when it was BCS. And so since we've gone to the Pac-12, I think, nothing's off the table now. I know people still, have some hesitancy about coming out to Utah because we're going to give them all the game they can handle, and we have great fans. But at the same time, we have a national name, and we're at a Power 5 conference, and so I think that those opportunities are only growing from here.
When you guys sit down to put schedules together, I know Chris Hill always had the A game, B game, C game kind of mantra. Is that still the same? Has Mark brought a little bit different feel with that? And how much input does Kyle have? I know Kyle will not be this much I will tell you, based on conversations Kyle and I had. He will not be coaching when you guys go to Baton Rouge. He's made that pretty clear to me that he probably will not be coaching that particular game. But when you guys sit down and schedule, what's your philosophy? Because you were here with Chris and helped Chris on the scheduling. You're now here with Mark. What has the philosophy changed at all on how you guys like to build your non-conference schedules?
Yeah, it has. And by the way, if I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle is still here. I mean, he's the best in shape guy at 60 I've ever seen in the business. So I'll never count him out. But I think it's definitely changed with Mark coming here. When we were scheduling with Chris, if you look at it, we're usually scheduling about 10 years out, which is a challenge. So when we got into the league, we made a bowl the first year, but the second two after that, we didn't make a bowl. And so your scheduling philosophy at that point is, hey, we got to make sure that we have some opponents that we have a good chance of winning because we're in a tough league. Well, now we've got our sea legs under us, as Chris Hill used to say. And with Mark coming in, Mark said, hey, we want to take this to the next level and start scheduling those opponents that have been tough for us to get in the past and that our fans would love to see and that our recruits would love to play. And so I think it's definitely been a focus that we're going to try and get the best opponents that we can. And Kyle does have a say, and he's always interested in who we're going to play. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you about that, but he's also really good about not being afraid of anyone and always want to take on a challenge. So usually it's a pretty good conversation with Kyle when we have someone tough that we want to play because he's always up for it.
Hey, last thing, and I know you get this a lot. People are always wanting to know in the short term, hey, can we flop this opponent out for another opponent? Can we get a better team versus the team that's there now? What's the biggest challenge in trying to remove an opponent and add a new opponent? Is it the short window of years you have because teams have scheduled out, or is it the financial side of it?
It's usually the schedule piece because if you look at schedules across the country, they're scheduled out so far that if you want to change someone that you have from 2 years from now, then you have to have a game for them you actually have to go out and basically find the game that will replace the one you want to get out of. So you have to find not only a new opponent for yourself, but you have to find a new opponent for the school that you're going to be leaving behind, and one that's comparable to you that their fans will be happy about. So it makes it a little more difficult with the long schedule out that we have set up right now.
This is a non-Utah related question, but I've asked Kyle Whittingham this, and I've asked Mark Harlan this. Do you foresee a day, since you're in this business, where there's a uniform schedule across maybe Power 5, where everybody's playing the same number of conference games, or do you not think that's realistic?
I don't know if that's realistic because it's hard to get that many people who have their own interests in mind and their own self-interest to come together on the same page when there's no governing person in charge. So the chances of it happening, I think, are pretty small because each conference has its own flux of when they're up, when they're down, and they're not going to be told on certain years who they're going to play. If they've got to rebuild their conference and have some wins, they're going to play teams that they can beat. If they're at a high level and want to take it to the next level, they're going to want to play anybody. So it's hard to get that consistency across the board. It would be nice, but I don't see it happening.
That's Kyle Brennan.